Good evening, everybody. Maybe we could stand for a prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord, we thank you for giving this opportunity this evening to pray and to consider our lives in the light of the gospel, the living truth, which is you yourself, Lord. Guide us during this time of learning and prayer and fellowship, and may we continue to build the kingdom of God with you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Okay. All right. Thank you. It's really great honor to be here. I'm an Opus Dei priest, so it's my full-time job is to be a priest for the prelature of Opus Dei. And people immediately ask, I'll just give a real quick bio here. So people immediately ask, well, what does that mean? Do you have a parish? Do you have a university or whatever? It's like, the Opus Dei priests mainly, they eat breakfast, okay? No. So we basically say Mass, we hear confessions, a lot of confessions, we give a lot of spiritual direction, and we preach a lot of retreats and things like that, okay? And give presentations like this on occasion. Normally we don't have parishes, although there are some. There's one in New York City that's cared for by the priests of Opus Dei, and that's their full-time job. And there's one in Chicago as well. In Houston, there's a place called the Holy Cross Chapel, which is a small but nice downtown chapel where it provides an opportunity for people working downtown to get to daily Mass. So they have Mass like at 11:30 in the morning. Other places are too. There's other parishes near there, but it's kind of right in the middle, and they have a nice group of people come to Mass on the daily thing. But the main things of Opus Dei priests are to support the lay people who participate in the spirit of Opus Dei, either officially as members of Opus Dei, or the many, many, many other people who perhaps aren't official members of Opus Dei. They haven't felt and received, I guess you could say, the vocation of Opus Dei, but they appreciate very much the teaching of Saint Josemaira, the spirit of what he taught, and the spiritual life that he guided. So, in the world, there are about 90 to 100,000 official members of Opus Dei. It's about, half the campus here, more or less. Twice the campus here. So 100,000 people who are either priests of Opus Dei like myself, or numerary members of Opus Dei, that is single men or women who live in the residences of Opus Dei, or the great majority by far are married people, men and women, who belong to Opus Dei, have a vocation Opus Dei, and they live out their vocation in their family lives, okay, in their ordinary works in their family life. So my job is to give support for all those people, especially to help them with their coaching, spiritual direction, and to provide for them sacraments, especially the sacrament of confession, because Saint Josemaira, who is right here, this is a picture of Saint Josemaira. If you didn't know, he was a nice smile there. No halo in this picture, but you could imagine a halo there because he's a saint. But his main goal was to promote the universal call to holiness, which is that everyone is called to be a saint by their baptism, okay? Whether they're man, whether they're woman, whether they're professional, whether they're a farmer, whatever the level of their education, whether they're married or single. The mere fact that they have been baptized means that Jesus has brought us into a new relationship with God, and that relationship is meant to, guess what? The goal is to end up in heaven, right? So it's a goal of sanctity, which begins here but ends in heaven. That's why you have this Sanctify series, which is really great, highlighting a few or number of the saints that you want to highlight. I'm really very happy. It's very exciting. You decided to highlight Saint Josemaira as one of these saints that you're focusing on. But as you probably know, the great, huge, overwhelming majority of saints, we don't even know what their names are, right? And that's on All Saints Day on November 1st. we all were called by the church to go to Mass that day and celebrate all the saints, some of whom we know their names, but very few we know their names. Do you know how many official canonized saints were actually written down? Saint so-and-so, Saint so-and-so. Anybody want to take a guess how many saints there are known in the church?
Like 10,000.
About 10,000. That's right on. It's about 10,000. So that's very good. It's about 10,000. But even there, it's kind of sketchy because there are a lot of martyrs from the early church, and the records weren't that good in the 100s and 200s. People were just trying to stay alive, and try to spread the faith and everything. So they didn't have canonization processes and that kind of thing. Which brings us to our topic, actually. That I was asked to talk about Saint Josemaira as being an instrument to inspire the universal call to holiness in and through ordinary life, and specifically through ordinary work. Okay, through ordinary work, and he said that Saint Josemaira said, if you want to think about what the model is for somebody who wants to participate in the spirit of Opus Dei or wants to know more about it, you need to look at the earliest Christians, okay? The early Christians were ordinary men and women who heard about the gospel, either from Jesus himself in the earliest days, or from St. Paul, St. Barnabas, or the other apostles through the ages, and they went and they talked to all the ordinary people, and they preached in the ordinary places, because even as of yet there were no churches specifically. Do you know where they normally worshipped? Where did the early Christians normally worship? Do you remember? In their homes. So like in a house, a large house, probably I would imagine it had to be a pretty large house. Once the authorities didn't like that and they started persecuting the worship in the houses, then they would often go to kind of the caves or the catacombs. Catacombs were like the underground cemeteries. Has anybody here ever been to Rome and seen a catacomb? You've been seeing a catacomb. So you go down and it's kind of deep, and then some of these areas, they have these kind of carved out spaces about the size of this basement. Maybe you could call this place the catacomb someday. But you'd have to bury somebody here first. So don't do that, okay? Don't bury. Say we're going to bury somebody under the stage. There was a famous bar. This is kind of there was a famous bar in Pittsburgh where I used to live, where supposedly somebody was buried under the stage. Okay, it was kind of this myth. They weren't sure or not. But anyway, the place closed. Eventually closed. The crypt. You'd have these kind of catacombs. And it'd be a place about this size, and it'd be dark, and it'd be underground. And the Roman authorities, as long as you stayed underground, they knew they were underground worshiping. But they said, they're just there underground. They're doing their thing there. We don't get it, but stay out, because these catacombs, cemeteries were always outside the walls of Rome. Because unless you were an emperor or something, then they could be buried within the city boundaries. But normally, the cemeteries were outside of the city walls. So that meant that the Christians were like outside of the city. They're not disrupting us too much. They're outside the city. They're doing their thing, and so they were okay with that for a while. For quite a while, it wasn't all persecution in the early church, or there wouldn't have been any church, right? It wasn't all persecution. There was a lot of persecution. There were a lot of martyrs, but there were also a lot of just sort of ordinary people who continued to do what they had to do in their vocation, and most of that was to do. How you doing? And doing ordinary work day by day, and that's why we don't know the names of most of the saints. We just heard here there are about 10,000 of saints of which we know their names, that's a figure I've heard too. But St. John on All Saints' Day in the book of Revelation says he saw this countless number which nobody could count, and probably some of you work in some computing centers and stuff, and you say, well, I could count that number. I don't know, St. John didn't have that advantage of what he only had, what he saw, but he said there was this countless number of saints, basically. And so, like a friend of mine told me on All Saints' Day, he says, oh yeah, that's the day we celebrate the nameless saints, right? And I'm like, wait, no, these saints have names, we just don't know what they are, right? I mean, that's different. I mean, it's not like saying they're these anonymous, non-existing persons. No, they are real saints. They had real names. They had real histories. They had real families. They're just kind of forgotten, which I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but most of us, I don't know what you plan to do. I didn't come here to make you depressed tonight, okay? But most of us will be forgotten after a number of years, okay? It's happened to almost everybody in history, right? Almost everybody is forgotten. There's a couple generations where you're remembered, perhaps, but even think, unless you're really into ancestry, which you might be into ancestry, usually in a family, there's somebody that's really kind of into ancestry and things, and I think that's a cool thing, but ancestry takes a lot of time, right? It takes a lot of time, you gotta search the thing, and it's a hobby, and it's fun, and it's very interesting, but it takes a lot of time. Most people don't have that kind of time, because they're just trying to do their day-to-day activities, serving the people in front of them, their family, their parents, your friends, trying to get the assignments you have to get done, looking for an internship this summer, whatever. And so you're not thinking about too much ancestry things, In fact, I think, a lot of people, I think, would have a hard time remembering the first and last names of their great-grandparents. I mean, your grandparents, I hope many of them are probably still alive for you, okay? Mine have long passed, but I remember them. I remember their names, okay? But the great-grandparents, maybe a couple, So maybe that's just me, but I think a lot of people, it's just that, and that's only 2 generations, right? Or 2.5 generations. And you start forgetting the people of your own family who are closest to you, right? And then somebody remembers and they remind you, but so it's natural that most of the saints are sort of forgotten by history. But that doesn't mean they're like lesser saints. They're just as much saints as St. Augustine, or St. Teresa of Avila, or St. Josemaira, or St. Francis of Assisi, who you had last month. But the Saint Wilhelm from Saxon Germany, he was a farmer, and he had a family with 6 kids, and they were all farmers, and he went to Mass as often as he could, and he prayed, and he taught people to pray, and he tried to do his business, his farming business, in a just way. He tried to treat people he worked with justly, and he tried to bring up his children with a sense of service toward others, and he prayed, and and lo and behold, he's in heaven now, and we don't know him, but he's just as much a saint as St. Francis of Assisi, okay? He's not a founder. St. Francis or St. Josemaira was a founder saint of Opus Dei, so it's kind of special. That's why he's famous, which is great. He's also a great saint, but at St. Josemaira, one thing he said once was, I know I'm getting older because people ask me, did you know St. Josemaira? But I didn't, okay? Because I'm not that old. But I'm pretty old, but I'm not that old, okay? But I am a contemporary. I think I was 10 in 1975, yeah. When he went to heaven, I was 10. So I consider myself a contemporary. But I didn't know him personally, okay? But I still know a lot of people who did know him personally. They're getting pretty old, but they did know him, or they lived with him, or they got to know him. And one of the things he said once about heaven was that his desire, actually, he wanted to go to heaven, okay, like all Christians, we want to go to heaven. His desire was to be in heaven, where God wanted him to be, okay? As holy as, because there are different grades of holiness in heaven. I don't know, we don't have time to go into this now, but there are certain different grades of holiness in heaven. It doesn't mean people are better than another, it's just there are different grades of holiness. Like I would say, probably St. Joseph is probably going to be holier than any of us here, okay? I don't know, just saying. It's maybe not. You want to outdo St. Joseph, you go for it. But it's going to be, you got a lot of work to do, and so do I. But St. Josemaira was saying that, his hope was that he would be in heaven, where God wanted him to be, and adoring God forever in heaven. And then his great joy would be to see members of Opus Dei throughout time, throughout history, make it into heaven and go up higher than him. That was his hope, like to see people go higher than him in heaven or whatever. So, and he was a founder, okay? And he wants to see ordinary people who are going to be forgotten actually become, you could say even in a way, holier saints. Although, like I say, in heaven, it's hard to gauge degrees of holiness. Although there are degrees of holiness. But, so that is meant to be very encouraging, because it's not only that the call to holiness is universal, what we call universal call to holiness, but that it is actual, and it is personal for everybody. Okay, universal and personal. That is to say, everybody's called to holiness, and that means personally each of us are called to holiness. Okay, and you can only be Saint you. You can't be Saint Teresa of Avila. You can't be you can't be Saint Benedict. Okay, you can't be Saint Bartholomew. There already was one. Okay, there already is one. Okay, you have to be Saint you, and there won't be another one if you don't become that Saint you, and if I don't become that Saint me, there won't be another one. It has to be you. Okay, so that the universal call to holiness, personal and universal and personal at the same time. And what I thought, so with regard to ordinary work, I think sometimes we look at work, we sort of categorize work as, well, I'm an engineer, or I'm a homeschooling mother, or I'm a military officer, or I'm a medical professional, or I'm a high school teacher, or I'm a factory worker. We have this automatic sort of classification of who we are kind of thing. And I guess that makes sense, because you have to categorize people in reality in different ways. But, through that work, whatever it is that you do, you're going to be that saint of that workplace, okay, and through that work. And this was very surprising. It seems like, because it is a universal, it's a accepted teaching very much in the church now, the universal call to holiness, we're all called to be saints, okay? A lot of people have heard that, and you hear it in church sometimes, you hear it in a homily or whatever, especially around All Saints' Day. But it wasn't so common when St. Josemaria founded Opus Dei, because the common thought was, if you really want to become a saint, if you really want to be a holy person, what do you have to do? Does anybody know what you have to do? Like what people used to have to do for the most was like leave the world. You have to, it was a Latin term was fuga mundi. You have to flee the world because it's corrupt, and because you can't really do anything there of any worth that's going to have long-lasting value. So you have to leave the world, and that's how the hermits at first started in about the year 250, 300. They left the world, went into the desert, okay, and they just sort of lived in the desert, and they just prayed, and then Saint Benedict came along and basically said, we need to organize this more, because a lot of people went out to the desert, but then they start bumping into each other and stuff like that, you know. So St. Benedict has said, you know, we got to organize this, okay? So he started what was called monasteries, okay? Monasteries were a place where you could like be out of the world, but at the same time be in a family context, and what was called a monastery. But it was still kind of, you have to leave the world in order to do this, okay? That's a really good thing, okay, for some people, okay? That's a really good thing. I have a friend who was a focus missionary from Pittsburgh a couple years ago, and he wanted to become a Carthusian monk. The Carthusians, they did the film Into Great Silence. I don't know if you heard of that film, Into Great Silence, which has a very short soundtrack because it's a very silent movie, because it's about a monastery in France called the Chartreuse, which is the original Carthusian monastery in France. Carthusians, it's just for men, and it's one of the hardest disciplines of living monastic life. So they get up at 2 a.m., then they go back to bed, they get up at 4 a.m., then they get up at 6 a.m., and they do the different liturgy of the hours, and then they work for a long time, and then they only eat vegetables, they don't eat meat, and I think you're in your room, and they bring a meal to you, a little bit like during the COVID pandemic, you know, you maybe had that where people, they bring you meals, and that's kind of like, it's kind of hard, right? Because you want to, when you eat, you kind of want to be with people and stuff. So it's a tough life. But for those who have the vocation to that life, it's a great life. If you have the vocation to be a Carthusian monk, that's great, because that you've been given the grace to do that. Most people don't have that vocation. In fact, I haven't heard from my friend who applied to be a Carthusian monk in Vermont. There's only one monastery in the United States, and it's in Vermont on a mountain, okay? And I haven't heard any news from him, but that's good, because he's not supposed to communicate with anybody. So no news is good news from the Carthusian monastery, okay? So if you have any friends in Carthusian monasteries, and you say, I haven't heard from this guy for 3 years, great, because he's not supposed to talk to you, okay? So, and the Poor Clares, it's a little bit like that for women. The Poor Clares religious order is one of the hardest, and in general, they're a little bit, they can communicate a little bit more. So anyway, most people don't have that vocation. And then the religious orders that developed after St. Benedict, basically in the West, modeled a more engaged with the world, a little bit more, like in education and in medicine and things like that. But at the same time, there was always this kind of like not full engagement with the world, okay? Because it's corrupt, needs to be redeemed, and we need to point to another world, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, okay? And so that's why religious wear habits, okay? You know what habits are? Habits are the special clothing they wear so that people, when they see them, they say, oh, that's a sister, or that's a Dominican priest, okay? And that their habits make you kind of lift your vision to heaven. That's what they're supposed to do, okay? That's why priests also wear, even though I'm not a religious priest, a priest wear what they do so that people see you, but priests are a little bit different because they see you so that you can help them. So they may say, I want to go to confession, or can you pray for my mom because, you know, she's really sick, or I want to get married in the church, what do I do? So that's a little bit like Cardinal Dolan in New York said, why do priests wear collars? Because it says, please bother me, okay? So that's kind of why priests wear like this, so people can bother them with their problems, and it's a beautiful thing, okay? That's what we do. So that's called ministry. So in all of this, what happened was it got a little bit lost, the original notion that Jesus preached, which was that, basically everyone was called to the kingdom of God, to be a child of God, and called to be build up the kingdom of God. And in the gospel, first of all, Jesus worked a normal job for 30 years, or 22 years, probably 21 years, worked as a manual work, okay? So that's sanctified that work. And then, when he preached the kingdom, he, in general, as I understand it, didn't say, everybody, get out of the world and go to somewhere else and leave what you're doing and go somewhere else. He just basically said, wherever you are, preach the kingdom, right? Wherever you are, tell the people about the kingdom and glorify God. He said that like after a lot of people had miracles, right? They had miracle, like the guy who one of my favorites is the demoniac who is called Legion. Remember that guy? Legion was filled with demons, okay? And he was very scary. And he was outside of town. He was very dangerous. He would gash himself and howl all night. Horrifying situation. And then Jesus said, what is your name? He said, we are Legion, we are many, right? And then they went into the pigs and they ran off the cliff. Remember this story of Jesus? And so, but then the guy was cured, right? And so he was like, kind of like sitting, kind of probably very tired, very kind of embarrassed, right? You must if a person a demon is exorcised out of a person, it must be kind of a little bit embarrassing because you're like, okay, like you're back to normal, but like what is this? Okay, so this guy's kind of there quiet, and the people are coming into town from the town. And they're saying, well, this is the guy who was so scary and, bad and wild and everything. He's in his right mind. They say his right mind. And this man then, I think because he was a little bit embarrassed, but also very happy, said to Jesus, he wanted to go with them. Remember what he said? He wanted to go with Jesus. But what did Jesus say? No, you go back into town and tell the people what has happened to you. Preach the kingdom through what has happened to you. Because that's going to be a bigger witness than anything you're going to tell other people. Everybody knows what you were like before, and now they're going to know what you're like now. So just go back into it, And, don't sin anymore, like he told Mary Magdalene too. Don't go in and don't sin anymore. Or the adulterous woman, he didn't say leave the world. He said go and don't sin anymore. But you're still going to be in Jerusalem probably. Okay, so these people didn't leave the world. They just had to have a conversion of heart. Okay, and go back to what they did with the desire now to build up the kingdom of God. And that's what St. Josemaira, when he said, work is all about that, because in ordinary work is where we can all be very effective witnesses to the gospel in lots of ways. And he said, this is like the gospel old, because Jesus came and basically said everybody has to have a conversion, but most people are going to kind of stay where they are and do the things they do. And but he says it's also new. So it's old like the gospel, but like the gospel it's new, because things change in life. The world is different now. What's something different about work now that wasn't the case 2,000 years ago? Can you think of anything? What's different about work now that wasn't probably the case at the time of Jesus? Anybody want to offer anything? The internet.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole thing of technology, right? So, technology has changed work in a lot of ways, okay? That's really good. I would say also education, right? Most people at the time of Jesus, they didn't know how to read or write. They only knew manual labor, okay? And so they could say, like, you have to sanctify your work, and they'd be like, oh, it's so hard. We work 12 hours a day in the sun, and it's really tough, or we fish all night, we don't catch anything. It was really hard work. Now, work with education is, it's perhaps more enjoyable it's a little bit more under your control. You know, the idea of the entrepreneur or the startup. You know, I've kind of got these ideas. You're excited about your work because you're kind of in control of them, right? It's not just kind of like, I got to go to this factory or I got to go in this field like they had to. Those, you still may have to do that sometime, which is good. I had a factory job when I was in college. It was one of the greatest experiences I had. It's where time went backwards because we were in the factory, and I had to discipline myself. Do not look at the clock. Do not look at the clock. Do not look at the clock. Because it'd be like 10, 15. Don't look at the clock. And I couldn't help it. I'd look at the clock and be like 10, 15, and 30 seconds. You know, it was just so slow. But that was a really, really good experience about work for me because actually the factory, okay, just on a human level, this factory that I worked at, and it was so boring, although my friends were there, so that was kind of fun, but it was so boring. We made construction equipment for roads, you know, like when you're stopped on a road and they're doing road work. We did that kind of stuff. I worked in a factory that made that equipment, and it lasts a long time. So I have a good time now, actually, when I am sometimes stopped in traffic for construction, because I look at the equipment, and sometimes I see the stuff from the company I worked at, and I always wonder, because I know it lasts a long time, I wonder if I worked on that thing right there, you know? It kind of gives me a little like, wow, and they're building roads. They're building Austin, Texas, you know, with the stuff I worked on, you know, 30 years ago in this factory, which I just thought, this is the most boring thing in the world. But look what they're doing with all this stuff. I had no idea, you know? It was so important, you know? Because you're only looking at that really specific thing you're doing. You're not looking at the bigger picture of what you're doing. But anyway, work has become more intellectual for a lot of people. Education, most people know how to read today. I think 98% of the world knows how to read and write today, more or less, to communicate. So the possibility of pride in work has increased in a way. Like, I'm going to do this project. This is going to be my legacy in work. This is going to be my company. I'm going to run things the way I want to run them. It's going to do these things. And that's not bad. Those are good ideals to have, but it can easily go, like, you can lose touch with the larger picture about what work is all about, which is basically service. You know, if my work isn't an act of service of some sort, then what is it? Okay? And I think most people would want their work to be a service of some sort, but we have to reevaluate that a lot. And so, you know, the gospel in today's world of work, it's going to take on a lot of new aspects, especially with regard to freedom of people, the choices they make, the way they use their schedule. Okay, and here's the last point I may leave with you in this talk. Maybe we'll have a few questions if you want. But Saint Josemaira, the founder of Opus Dei, he was really keen on the notion of it's actually the work itself, the actual thing you're working on, that could be a moment of prayer, okay? So it's not like you fill up your day with work and you work as hard as you can, you do your best, and then you have to have all these prayer times, like go to Mass in the morning and say the rosary in the evening, and maybe do some Eucharistic adoration during the day. All those things are good, but they just are a little bit like a frame around your work. He said, don't lose sight of the fact that it's the work itself that is also prayer, right? It's supposed to be contemplative. And that was new, because kind of in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance, that kind of the idea was work was something you had to do. But even in the religious monastery, you would work, and yeah, you'd offer your work the best you could, but it was kind of, you had to do manual work as kind of out of humility, and because you had to support the monastery by making jam or making wine or something, so you could have some income for the monastery. But it was kind of separate from your prayer life in a way. and Saint Josemaria actually following Saint Therese of Lisieux, which is basically all the little things of each day can be offered to God. You remember that, the little way of Saint Therese, right? All the little things. And then Saint Josemaria he liked Saint Therese a lot. He got a lot of help from her. But he said, it's the work itself. It's not just the little things. It's actually everything that you do is contemplative. It can be contemplative. So what does that mean practically? What does that mean practically? Well, let's just take if I'm a farmer, okay, I'm a rancher or something, and I'm trying to herd 20 cows to go sell these cows. This is Texas after all, so I'm trying to herd these 20 cows, going to take them to auction, okay? And it's hard work, kind of getting these cows together and loading them up and everything. Does that mean I should be praying a rosary as I do that? Kind of like praying the rosary, say a bunch of Hail Marys. Every cow gets a Hail Mary as it goes in the truck, or something like that. Maybe, okay. And that's not a bad thing. It's always a good thing to pray Hail Mary, okay? Don't get me wrong. That's not the point of this talk. Father Marty says you don't have to pray the Hail Mary. No, it's always a good thing to pray the Hail Mary. But it's not just praying a Hail Mary as you're loading the cow into the truck. It's actually offering that moment of loading that cow into the truck as the best you can and offering that to God, whether or not you say a Hail Mary, okay? It's that actual work, which is contemplative. And you see that in your work as students and as professionals that you're preparing to become, that your mind is going to be very occupied with things all day, with numbers and programs and errors you're trying to correct, and communications and everything. See, and that's what has to become the prayer. You have to take care of this patient if you're a medical professional, and not say, well, excuse me, I gotta go pray, I gotta do some prayers, but no, you're turning that into prayer. Does that make sense? You actually turn the actual work into prayer. And he said in The Way, the most famous book of Saint Josemaria, he said that an hour of study for a modern apostle is an hour of prayer. So an hour of study, what you have to do a lot, that can be an hour of prayer. And that doesn't mean you have to, it just means that actual activity is prayer. So, I don't know, for example, one thing I'm into right now is, lastly, is that I have to drive a lot for my job because I live in Houston, but we have Opus Dei activities in Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and yes, I have to say it, College Station. But yeah, I had to say it. I don't go there. Somebody else goes to College Station at the moment. But so I drive a lot. Okay, I have to drive a lot. So I like music a lot. So I like to listen to music sometimes, and I like books. Listen to books and stuff. That's good. And I like the rosary. So sometimes I pray the rosary when I'm driving and that kind of thing. But sometimes I just unplug it all, and I won't do anything for an hour. I'll just drive the best I can. I'm just gonna drive the best I can, the speed limit, and not get mad at other drivers, and try not to fall asleep, and I don't know, just drive well, because you can drive well or you can drive poorly, right? So I try to drive the best I can and make that actual drive, which seems like the most meaningless, unimportant thing, but that's part of my job, is I gotta drive, okay? And it's not a matter of just, you gotta fill up everything with, and I think in our culture where it's you got a silent moment, you gotta fill it up with some noise, you gotta fill it up with some ideas or something. Sometimes you don't, you just have to okay, I'm gonna do this. This walk to class, you can try that sometimes, walk into class. I'm gonna walk the best I can, offer it to God, look around, thank God for yet another nice day in Texas. And, wow, some people who designed this place, they really know what they were doing, and they designed, And okay, I'm looking forward to the next class. Who's gonna be there? Thinking about who's gonna be there, maybe praying for them a little bit. So just actually offer up those things of the day. It's really great. It's a big discovery. It was a big discovery for me. I didn't realize that all those ordinary things, especially work, could really be an occasion of holiness. But it really is. And you have St. Josemaira to thank for that. He wasn't the only one, but he was kind of the main one for the 20th century who brought that idea back that everybody was called to be a saint, okay, and that most people through their ordinary work were called to be saints. And I'll leave you with one last anecdote. This is the last anecdote. One time, like I said, I didn't know St. Josemaira, but I heard this story. One time he was showing people, giving a tour of the headquarters of Opus Dei in Rome, which has a lot of chapels. They're not really big, but they're different chapels in this complex, and they're nice. Some of them are very beautiful. Some of them have some nice, very nice artwork. And so he was giving some visitors a tour of some of these chapels, and they were looking through the chapels, and it was very nice. In Rome, for those, some of you mentioned you've been to Rome before, but in Rome, marble, the material marble is like our plywood in a way, because there's so much marble in Italy, okay, in northern Italy, that you're shocked at first when you see all these churches, like all the marble. You're like, oh my gosh, because it's very beautiful. But it's a kind of a normal building material. Anyway, he was showing these chapels. Most of them have a lot of marble and very, very beautiful. And then finally somebody said to him, okay, Father, what is your favorite chapel? We saw a bunch of chapels, and in the last chapel they're in, they said, which is your favorite that you've shown us? It's a pretty good question, because he's shown them a number of nice chapels. And the chapel they were in was called the Chapel of the Holy Family. And it has a very beautiful piece of artwork of the Holy Family, St. Joseph, Our Lady, Child Jesus, and the grandparents, Joachim and Anne, okay? Very nice, large, beautiful. And on either side of the altar are these windows. There's like a window there, a small window there, and a small window there, stained glass, nice. What he did was he opened one of those windows, okay, in that chapel, and it was, had to be very thick glass because it was right along a very busy street, but you can't hear it because the glass is thick. But once he opened the window, you heard a very busy street and lots of motorcycles, lots of cars and stuff going by. And he looked out the window. He was on the second floor. He looked out the window. He pointed down to the street down below, busy Roman street. And he says, "That's my favorite chapel. Out there, out there in the street. That's where I really find God." Okay. And he really meant it. I think he really meant that. I mean, he loved liturgy, he loved nice chapels and everything, especially loved the Mass, but he especially had particular love for finding God in the street, in your car, in your house, on the way to work, all these things, okay? So, okay, I guess I went a little bit long, sorry. I'm a preacher, we always go too long. That's the way it is, sorry. Any questions before you have like a nice dinner or something? Yeah. Well, I'm glad. In a way, I'm glad you don't have any questions, because it is so simple. That's what a lot of people don't understand Opus Dei, because it's actually very simple. And when you explain it, they're like, okay, so ordinary life, my work, and my family, I got to sanctify all that. Okay. So, but that's Gabriel.
First of all, I think it's funny that you mentioned this being like kind of catacombs.
Yes.
That used to be the name of this basement.
Oh, you used to call this the catacombs.
Yeah,
That's great. I love it. Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. Okay.
With what you mentioned with that anecdote at the end, so the streets were like his favorite chapel. To me, I find the liturgy to be like probably the most consoling experience I've ever had in my entire life. And like, even though there's a sense of, okay, yeah, this makes sense, like the walk to my to home, it's a sanctifying and it's an extraordinary experience. The idea of like that being my favorite, as of like preferring that to the liturgy,
Right.
it's just like very like no, absolutely not.
Right.
It's not
No,
my
okay.
favorite.
No.
So yeah, maybe like, do you want me to like unpack that? Let's say close my
Yeah. No, I think that's well put. I mean, you have to take a little bit in context, right? He was giving a lesson,
Right.
you know. He had a great love for the liturgy, because that as a priest, as a priest, and as I know, that's our ordinary work. So that's what we're supposed to do the best during the day, and that should be our best thing during the day, is to celebrate the liturgy of the Mass and liturgy of the hours, and hear confessions, for example, and celebrate the sacraments. That should be, you know, and for sure, that should be the preferred activity. And I think it was for him, yes. However, the weird thing is, he said, not that it was his favorite, but he did say once that his most sort of mystical experience that he had actually occurred in Madrid, Spain. They have these things, and now they're not there anymore, but it's like in San Francisco, they have streetcars. You know what streetcars are? They're like the early subways before they went underground, right? So streetcars were the public transportation, and St. Josemaira was on a streetcar once, and he had this very extraordinary spiritual experience on the streetcar, reading the newspaper, where he discovered why he had, that he was a child of God, which, and he kind of got dizzy. He went out into the street, and he just kept saying in Aramaic, Abba, Abba, which means father, right, in Aramaic, Abba, or I think Hebrew too, Abba, Abba, which is, he just kept saying that, just kind of wandering around saying Abba, Abba, like father, father, father. He was just talking to God as his father. So he said that was probably the most mystical experience he had. He didn't say it was his favorite though. So I think that's well said, Gabriel, because in the ordinary life, his favorite, I'm sure he would say, my favorite moment of the day is the Mass. Because he said that has to form the center and root of your life. Yes.
What prompted that discovery in that story there?
He doesn't know. It was just a grace. It was a charismatic grace. You know.
Father.
Yeah. The thing is, the grace. There are three main types of graces. Grace is very complicated in a lot of ways, but it's simple at the same time. It's the divine life of God within us. Okay. And those graces are either basically sanctifying grace, which is what the sacraments are for. That we, through beginning with baptism, you want to remain in sanctifying grace. That's why you're called sanctify, right? So, because you want to be in that condition of sanctification, okay? And that's a habitual grace that you want to keep. And if you lose it by sin, how do you get it back? Or how do you receive it again? Through the sacrament of confession, normally, right? So, sanctifying grace. But there's also what are called charisms, okay? Charisms are kind of extraordinary, a little bit extraordinary graces that people receive for different reasons, and only God really knows, but they're for the building up of the church, basically, okay? So, the saints throughout the ages, those are the things that are really interesting to read about the saints many times. They have these extraordinary graces, right? These exciting graces, these things they do that we can't do. You know, maybe they can speak in tongues, or maybe they can bilocate. You know what bilocation is, right? You can be in more than one place at the same time. I have an aunt who her uncle, he's passed away now, but when he worked with Padre Pio in Pietrelcina, Italy, he was a Franciscan Capuchin, a monk. His name was Father Dominic. He was from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay, so he was one of Padre Pio's secretaries in Pietrelcina, Saint Pio, and he got sick, and he had to go back to recover in Indiana, in the state of Indiana. And Padre Pio came to visit him in Indiana. And he said, "Wow, Padre, wow, it's great to see you. I thought you were in Pietrelcina." And he said, "I am." So he was in Indiana, the state of Indiana, and he was in Pietrelcina because he could bilocate, okay? Those are special charismatic graces that some people have, okay? So charismatic graces. So, in any case, those graces are normally unexpected. St. Paul talks about these. The thing of St. Peter when his chains dropped when he was in prison. Remember when they were in prison and all of a sudden the angel came up and they said the chains fell off and they walked out of the prison. Things like that. They're special moments in the history of the church that serve to build up the church in those moments. And I think with the St. Josemaira story of having this extraordinary experience of divine filiation, that he was a child of God in that moment, in the early days of Opus Dei, I think even though the members of Opus Dei normally don't have those experiences ourselves, we can look to that as an inspiration to desire to have a deeper sense of our divine childhood, okay? And so him wandering around saying Abba, 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 kind of just overcome by grace in that moment, is also, we can do that in a little bit of a smaller, just in our own hearts, Abba, So, if I'm ever here again and I hear somebody's been out wandering around the tower going Abba, 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 I know what happens, so. But yeah, it's a charismatic grace, special, spontaneous, for the building up of the church. Rafa, you have a question?
Yeah, well, actually, a comment as well.
Go ahead.
On that.
I'm sorry, I can
go there.
Okay, no, go ahead. We can hear you.
Comment is that actually we know that San Josemaria had some other supernatural or extraordinary supernatural events, but we really never focus on that because that's not our vocation. So we actually focus into what is ordinary. So these experiences, and I think there are a few of Our Lady conversing with him.
Yeah, he had a number but he didn't like to talk about the extraordinary experiences he had in general, so that people didn't think, oh, I'm not having those experiences, so I must not be very holy. And so he kept those down. He told a few of them, like that one. He also, he probably met his guardian angel at least once during the Spanish Civil War. He was he was in a very dangerous situation. Somebody was about to beat him up, and another big guy kind of protected him and kind of chased the guys away or whatever, kind of big guy. And then that guy kind of leaned over in the ear of St. Josemaria and he said, well, there you go, you mangy donkey. A mangy donkey is kind of dirty donkey, okay? And you say, well, that's not very nice. But see, the thing is, St. Josemaria called himself in his prayer, I'm a mangy donkey. So, and only God knew that. He didn't tell anybody that he called himself mangy donkey. And all of a sudden this guy who protects him says, well, there you go, you mangy donkey. And then he didn't disappear, but just kind of went away, And he said, I think that was my guardian angel. People, the thing is, it's not that rare that people have experiences sometimes, okay? So, yeah, but he tried to not emphasize those. Camille, how are we doing on time? Are we okay? Okay. Does anybody have a job in mind that you think it's going to be really hard to sanctify that job? Maybe not the one you're preparing for, but think of some jobs, because he said that any work can be sanctified.
Being a software engineer.
Software engineer, can it? Yes, it can, but there are lots of sort of risks, right? It depends on what company you're working for. Always like, what are the ends of this company? What is your participation in some of these things that you have to evaluate? But definitely no, software engineering. He would say you can sanctify being a software engineer. No problem. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Some people ask, what about entertainment? Like somebody's like an entertainer, of some sort. like a musician, a professional musician, right? Austin is the capital of live music, right? So they say, what about to be a musician? Well, it's going to be hard. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's not going to easy. It's not going to be easy to raise a family if you're a touring musician. That's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to keep a prayer life. Probably you're going to have a really chaotic sort of schedule. But yes, you can.
A lot of temptation as well.
A lot of temptation in some professions. There's a lot of temptation. Especially like in the performing arts, I would say there's a lot of temptation to a certain libertine lifestyle. But other professions have their problems too. There was a time when Catholics were very discouraged to become financial, like bankers. It wasn't. I think. There may have been a long time in the Middle Ages where a Catholic shouldn't be a banker, because banking depends on charging money for holding money, right? People give you money, and then you charge them for holding your money, but then you give them money back with the interest, right? So it's the whole thing of the interest. That is currently a person can be a Catholic and be a banker, be in financial institutions. Businesses are so many different types of businesses, right? I always think, what about marketing? I think anybody here in marketing? Well, no, don't tell me if you're in marketing. But no, marketing I find is really interesting, right? Because marketing depends on systematically lying a lot about your product, right? Because you say, this is the best product out there. Really? Probably not. I mean, okay, if you use this, you will be a happier person for sure. All these doctors are saying, you use this medicine, it's gonna help you a lot. This is the best car out there by far. It just came out. This is by far the best car, the best design out there. Really? Probably not. Okay, so what's the difference there? What is it about marketing that I think it is because I think it is sanctifiable to be good marketing. I think you just have to remind people that there's hyperbole is not necessarily lying, right? So say, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest singer on earth is about to appear behind the screen. Really, the best here right now? Probably not, right? But it's hyperbole, right? It's part of the presentation, right? So marketing, I think, depends a lot on hyperbole, and so you got to be careful though, and because you could get in a situation where there is a lot of fraud going on, a lot of lying going on. But marketing, no, I think marketing can be done well as long as there's a certain the contextual hyperbole is sort of understood, I think. How about gambling? People have asked me, can I be a professional gambler? You ever watch poker on TV, on like late night TV? They have these poker stations. Okay, I'm glad you guys don't watch poker, man. But like, if you flip around the channels, there are these stations that have the World Series of Poker, right, and that kind of thing. And somebody asked me once, what about being a professional poker player? Like, is that a sanctifiable job? What do you think? Anybody, who would say it's possible to sanctify playing poker professionally? Oh, there's one. Okay, interesting. I think you can, because there's a difference between recreational gambling, which is very dangerous in a lot of ways. I mean, you can recreationally gamble, but you have to be very careful, okay? Because it should be recreation, and you shouldn't be spending all the money of your family, and you shouldn't be addicted and all that kind of thing. It's very dangerous. A professional, I think, poker player, I'm not sure, but I haven't thought about a whole lot, but I think it's possible, because you're basically, other companies are investing in you, okay? It's usually not your money when you're a professional poker player. They're using you as a player, and these companies, these investors are, it's understood, we're gonna invest so much money in this World Series of Poker or whatever. So I think a person probably could be a professional poker player, but I still have to think about it. But other forms of crime, not, you couldn't sanctify being a member of an organized crime network. I wouldn't say, okay, because the whole thing is, you're doing something against service, right? You're just serving some corrupt gain for probably just a few people, right? No, it's but it's I guess any work isn't perfect at the same time because of original sin. It's probably not perfect, so there's a spectrum probably in anything that you do. Do you think there's any profession that, besides holy orders maybe or something, that is a secular profession that is sort of more sanctifiable than others?
Pediatrician.
Okay, so something like pediatrician, doctor. I think medicine probably is in that line, because medicine is, at least in theory, you're supposed to go into medicine with a spirit of service, right? Now, does everybody do that? Probably not, okay? I think even I say doctors, I say especially nurses, nursing, which is all about serving others, alleviating pain, making sure people are comfortable, making sure people are well attended. I think it's a very sanctifiable profession. Education probably is in there too. It's interesting because these are the professions: medicine, education,
The police.
military, and police. These are ones that were especially sort of developed out of Christianity. There wasn't anything before Christianity. There wasn't anything called a hospital. Hospitals came. Do you know where hospitals came from? Anybody know? Hospitals came from. It comes from the word hospitality, right? Or hospice is a guest, right? So hospitals the places where the pilgrims would get tired, or they'd be sick, and they would rest in these places. They're still called hostels. You've heard of these places called hostels if you're in Europe and stuff, where you can rest and for cheap. And they would care for the sick people on the pilgrimage. And little by little, these things became known as hospitals, where people would actually, because it used to be when you were sick, a doctor would come to you, more or less, okay? But it later became, you would go to these places where you could be cared for, and they became known as hospitals. So it kind of came out of the faith, actually. And nurses used to be dressed. You look at old pictures of nurses, they kind of, had these kind of, these hats, these kind of strange hats. They looked a little bit like nuns' habits, because they were. Nuns often were the nurses, right? And so nurses came out of that profession. Okay, Gabriel, are we on?
If we don't have any more questions,
Okay.
y'all can ask Father Marty.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, I have some. If anybody wants a prayer card, saying, I brought